Greetings, foolish mortals. Today, we're painting the Mutalith Vortex Beast for Warhammer 40,000. So submit to the will of Zeech, and let's do some hobby. So here we have the box for the Mutalith Vortex Beast. It's an online only, so it doesn't have a fancy box. Comes with 2 sprues, one for the optional extras and one for the body. You also get 2 bases, a round one and a square one for the old world. We want the round one. And some instructions. Now this is a dual kit. It can make a Slaughter Brute or a Vortex Beast. We want the Vortex Beast. So first thing I'm going to do is clip out the parts. Now I'm going to do these in sections because it's a bit of a complicated kit and it's not really intuitive which parts go where. So instead of being confused, I'm just going to do these one section at a time. So section 1 is one of the legs. So I'm just going to use a blunt knife to scrape away the mold lines. Because every part is several different pieces, there's lots of opportunities to hide the mold lines on this, so they're not too bad. I'm just going to brush away the plastic shavings. So I use Citadel plastic glue, and we're going to start here with the left rear leg. So just going by the instructions, going to put the 2 pieces together, and from the very first piece it becomes apparent that this is not going to be the easiest kit to put together. So you've just got to sort of move the pieces against each other until they slot into where they're supposed to fit. So it took a little while for that one, but we eventually got it to stick together against the 2 ridges. Now the second part of that leg is a lot easier because it's the 2 main parts and they just clip together pretty easily. Now we are going to go into step 2, which is the rear right leg. And again, that starts off pretty easy. The 2 main parts go together. But then this next part, again, it's a little bit tricky, and you've got to maneuver and make sure that the ridges line up exactly right, and then the top part slides on that ridge as well. So after that, we just make sure that they are firmly together and there's no gaps, and then we can join the 2 legs together. So again, you have to make sure that all the ridges line up properly. There's like an exact way to do it, and it's not always intuitive. So the next part is the body. So start off putting the 2 pieces of the body together, and then there's this little round bit, which again had a little bit of trouble making sure that it goes on exactly in the right spot. So this next part is like the neck, if you can call it a neck, but that's where the tentacles go onto the body. And now I can attach that belly part of the body onto the legs, and again you've just got to make sure it fits in exactly right. So now I'm going to start building onto the body. So here's another really weird long shaped piece that I just have to make sure gets in right, and some of these have parts like these horns which kind of overlap the other piece to lock the 2 parts together, but it can make it a little bit finicky. So we're going to move on to the left arm. So it has one of the claws which connects onto half of the arm, and then the other half just slots pretty easily onto each other. It's one of the easier pieces. And then you connect that onto the body. Again, it's a very long boundary between the 2 pieces, and there's like a little tab part which slots in underneath, so you've just got to maneuver that around. And then there's like the shoulder part which goes on top of that, and that will lock in to its place. I eventually got it to fit right, and now we're going to move on to the back plate. So this part does like really snap together, as you can see, so you've got to push firmly there, and then that will connect onto the rest of the back. And once that part's on, it's starting to sort of look fairly complete, the body. There's a few more parts though. There's this big spike that's on the top ridge of his back. So that will slot in, as you can see. And now I'm going to go for the other arm. So that's just two main pieces there, which will go together. And then there's like the parts of the claws of the hand. So that will slot into the rest of the arm. And then that will go on. This is another one of those weird joins that isn't quite complete. And there's a little bit that hooks in underneath. But once that's all together, we are nearly done with the body. There's one last part which goes in over the top like that. So that's the body pretty much done. We're just going to add in some more spikes. So these like shoulder spike things go in these little indentations there. And from there, the body is looking pretty much complete. So we can now move on to the next part, which is the rest of the Vortex Beast. So you can see here there's an option to build a Slaughter Brute or the Vortex Beast. We're going to go the Vortex Beast. So we're going to use the tentacle parts. So that comes in 3 parts. And this is one of the simpler parts of the model. They just slot into the main central tentacle like that. And then that will go in the neck cavity. I'm actually going to leave those separate and paint them as separate pieces. Then the tail has these little mouth teeth thingies, and they go over the top of the tongue, and you just rotate them around until they fit against the bumps that are on the main part of the tail to get a close fit there. So I'm going to assemble the tail onto the body and paint that as one part, so I'm not going to paint that separately. And now we've got the vortex, so there's a few pieces here. So the little spiral arms of the vortex, so one of those will go in, and then the half of the orb, which is separate to the Chaos Star, that goes on, and you just gotta make sure that all the little ridges slot in properly. And then the other spiral arm on the other side. And you just got to make sure those little arms do connect back with where they join on the Chaos Star. That one was giving me just a little bit of trouble. Lastly, the nipple horn things will go on the Vortex Beast. I guess he is taking cues from Magnus there. So there's 4 of those, and they just go in the little indentations on its chest. So here we have the completed assembly. So we've got the main body there, and you can see here there's quite a few joins where the halves of the arms and a bunch of pieces. So they're going to look unsightly if we don't cover them up. So I use a thing called sprue glue. It's basically some plastic glue mixed with pieces of sprue. And it's really good for this purpose of filling in those little gaps that might be a bit hard to do with green stuff. So I just get some sprue glue and I spread it over the gap. I just got to control the right amount. And then once that's dry, I get a very fine file and I just smooth it out. And then I can also use some regular plastic glue. I like to use the Tamiya extra thin just to smooth things out a little bit more. So then we're ready to paint. I put them on my painting rack, and then I've also made a little scenic base, put a dead Zangor and some rocks and skulls. So I paint this in Wraithbone, and how we're going to paint this is similar in color to a little Chaos Spawn I made the other day. And I used a technique called wet blending. So contrast paints are really good for this. It gives good gradients, and it's really easy for a big monster with lots of texture. So I'm actually going to start with Druchii Violet, which is a shade, but I'm going to use it just as a regular paint. I'm going to paint all the pads and joints and things like that, all in Druchii Violet, and also the central part of his chest. So it looks like that. And the next color I'm going to use is Shyish Purple. So I'm going to do most of the rest of his body in Shyish Purple. But what I want to do is kind of blend it in with the heavier armor plates and the 4 limbs of him to sort of blend down from that shyish purple down to a black. So once I've got all the main parts that I just want to have shyish purple, what I do is I really thickly load on the top half of the part that I want to blend. So you can see there it's very thick on the shyish purple, and then I come in from the bottom with my color that I want to blend, and in this case it's Black Templar. And then so I sort of paint up, and then I start to literally just blend the colors together. So just mix them on the surface of the model until I get an effect that I like. You can see the black and the purple are mixed together. So on this armor plate here, I'm just going to do the same thing. So start off with the shyish purple, and then add the Black Templar onto the extremities, and then just mix them in so you get that transition from purple to black. So I'm also going to do some blending on his chest as well, except I'm going to go from shyish purple down to the Druchii Violet, but it's the same method, just combining the two colors on the model. Now for his tail, I'm again going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use Magos purple. And I actually went back and changed this to Druchii Violet later because I didn't like that. But that's how it looks, and you get a really good transition between those colors. So next I'm going to use Wraithbone, and I'm just going to clean up any of the horns, teeth, fangs, hooves, anything that is going to be sort of a bone color. So I've just cleaned all those up. Now I'm going to start with a Wildwood and Abaddon Black. So I'm going to really thickly put on the Wildwood, and what that is going to do is create some sort of variation in browns. Then I'm going to take the Abaddon Black, I'm going to dry brush that towards the edges of the hooves and claws, and that gives sort of a gradient kind of effect, I guess similar to the wet blending but using dry brushing. So that's what it looks like, all the parts that I wanted in that brown to black. I'm going to use Skeleton Horde to do all of the other spikes and things. So I'm going to put it on really thick because I want some contrast in that, not too light. So you can see it's quite dark there, and then I go back with some Wraithbone and I just make some little edge highlights and highlight down sort of the top or the end of each one of these little spikes. So you can see there it's quite striking. So pretty much the last part are the little tongues, and I'm going to do those in Vulpus Pink. So again, just thickly put the Vulpus Pink contrast on the tongues, and that's what it looks like. The whole body is complete, but you can see some is rubbed off by handling. That's just contrast. It rubs off very easily, so I'm just going to fix those. And now I'm going to move on to the tentacles. So I'm going to again use Vulpus Pink. I'm going to water it down a little bit with contrast medium. I'm just going to thickly put that on all the tentacles, but not the inside part of the tentacles. So once that's done, I'm going to use some thinned down Carroburg Crimson to do the inside part. So I get a bit of a contrast there. Now I'm going to use Athematic Blue to do all of the drool parts. So just really thickly put that on all of the drool parts, and it gives a nice contrast. Now I'm going to go back and do the teeth the same way that I did all the spikes on the body. So start off with Skeleton Horde and then highlight the edges of the teeth with Wraithbone. So that's the tentacles done. I think that looks pretty nice, contrast between pink and blue. Now we're going to use Black Legion, and we're going to start on the Vortex. So I'm going to undercoat the Chaos Star first in Abaddon Black, because then we're going to use a number of metals. So Lead Belcher first, and so I'm going to dry brush that on with a large dry brush. Then I'm going to use Nuln Oil to dull it down and give it some shading. Then I'm going to use Necron Compound to lightly dry brush it again, just catching the edges. So that's what it looks like. Now I'm going to use Wraithbone to paint all of the little flame things. So I'm also going to be pretty liberal with going over some of the metal with the Wraithbone, because I'm going to do some more wet blending to make kind of like a warp flame effect. So that's what it looks like with Wraithbone. So I'm going to use 2 colors and contrast medium. So Levian blue is the first one. So I'm going to pretty thickly put that on the edges of the flames. Then straight away I get a Callian green and I start to blend those together while drawing it down towards the base of the flame. Then without stopping, I just clean off my brush and then I get some contrast medium to draw it out further, so you get that transition from the Levian blue right down. And I can just add colors as I go while it's still wet to just get the blending that I'm happy with. So just going to go across all of the flames, starting from the outside and working in, just doing that same kind of technique. Now I'm got down to the spiral arms and the little licks of flame that are coming off the central ball, but I'm not going to paint the central ball yet because I want that to sort of be a more glowing effect, but all these arms are coming off it, so that's what it looks like. And now I'm going to use some really thinned down Callian green, so it's like a 10:1 ratio of Callian green with contrast medium, and I'm going to swirl that all over the ball to give kind of, yeah, like a glowing kind of effect, and to make sure I don't have any streaks but have some little swirls instead. So that's what it looks like. Everything's done, so I'm just going to give it some varnish. So I'm going to use satin varnish to give it a little bit of a shine. 3 coats I used for this, and now I just need to assemble. So going to attach the tentacles into the hole. So I started off using plastic glue, but I switched to super glue here. And then I put the vortex on. Now I didn't even glue that because it's quite a tight fit. So just make sure it slots in there. Now I attach it to my scenic base. And for that I use some paper clips to sort of pin it on to give it a stronger hold. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some little pink tufts onto the base. So I just use PVA to give it a bit of a stronger connection, a stronger stick. So I'm going to put several of these tufts on until I'm happy with the end result. And finally we have the finished product. Really happy with how it turned out, and I almost entirely just use contrast and wet blending. So hopefully this helps you build and paint your own warp abominations for the glory of Tzeentch. Thanks for watching.